Hey everybody, Phoenix Aurelius here. Today we're going to be chatting a little bit more about how to efficiently use a retort. Retorts are commonly used in alchemical and spagyric lab practice, but a lot of people are just trained to use them a lot like they might use other chemical lab glassware. The idea of using a retort is to perform a philosophic distillation. Typically it's a philosophic rectification because every time you pass it through the retort, it activates, potentizes the material and makes it more piercing in its effect. It has the effect of imbuing celestial niter into the material on the causal plane over and over and over the more that you distillate or cohabate through a retort. However, if you do that same thing through an alembic, now you are essentially imbuing celestial salt or removing the principle as you are constantly cohabating or distilling or whatever through that. So they're two entirely different pieces of distillation where one creates the material to be a very piercing distillate, the other creates it to be a very soft distillate. One is already charged, the other is very open and passive and able to be imbued. So that's kind of the reason why we use retorts and alembics in alchemical practice, and they each have their own use. Now, traditionally, the way that a retort would be used, first of all, there wouldn't even be an opening to the retort. The fluid would be poured in through the neck, allowed to settle while sitting upwards, like this, for some time, then tilted downwards at a certain angle and allowed to gently distill. And alchemists would have all sorts of devices that would range from like a little bent takeoff valve, which we can easily use in this little thing. We could just wrap this with a little bit of rye flour and water, and you can use cloth like an old bed sheet or an old shirt. Just rip it up into a couple of strips, dip it inside of the rye flour and water mixture, and wrap it in order to create a seal. And when it dries, you'll see it becomes nice and airtight, and you're not going to get the slippage or anything that you otherwise would. So at any rate, this would be a perfectly acceptable distillation thing. Now if you want to create it under a vacuum, under these days you're going to want to make sure that you do have ground glass so that you can load it and then seal this. And this would be the exact same thing. Either use a cork that you bored a hole through and carefully fit this through, or you could work with glass tubing if you want to create your own kind of distillation kit, or you can use one of these and then now have a 2440 receiving flask and a vacuum takeoff valve. Again, up here you just have to make sure that your rye water mixture is adequately blended so that you're not going to break a seal while trying to do a small little vacuum distillation. The other thing that is often done is taking a condenser, and a condenser, again, you just stick the end of it straight into the condenser, seal it either by boring a cork and sticking this through it and corking the end inside of here to make this airtight, or else by sealing it through any other method that you might know of or any other that I've discussed here, and there you have it. Now you can pass water through this, or just the extra length of this should actually be more than enough to prevent the vapors from spewing out. Now vapors spewing out is one issue, because you certainly don't want them just spewing out and then leaving the flask. But even if you're spewing them into the flask with a device like this, you still need them to condense. So to prevent that from happening in the first place, try and keep your temperatures low, try and use a water bath, use a magnetic stirring water bath if you can. If you're working with ethanol, that's true. If you're working with less volatile solvents, then you're going to want to increase to maybe an ash bath or a sand bath. If you're working with more volatile solvents than ethanol, then still work with a water bath, but maybe work with just like a room temperature water bath, or gently increase the heat to match the distillation temperature of your solvent. And always be sure to carry ice and ice packs on hand to add into the ice bath, and be sure to leave enough room inside of your ice bath for that so that you can drastically cool the temperature if you get too high, and so on and so forth. Also, the other thing is just having a simple terry cloth will help a great deal. You take a terry cloth and you dip it into a little basin full of ice cold water with a couple of ice cubes, and then you can kind of fold and wrap it around your retort like this, and that alone, when this is wet, it will kind of have this gravity feeling where it hangs down. That alone will help to condense the vapors. But over time, the towel is going to get hot, so you're going to have to attend to the distillation a great deal. Take this off, dip it back in cold water, and repeat the process. I've always found that to be a pain in the ass. So if your vapors aren't like completely spewing out, and your retort neck is just maybe too short of a distance, and you don't want to add a condenser or anything else, then one of these little Massey fans are absolutely awesome. It's just a desktop fan, and you can plug this in. They have like usually 12-foot electric cords, so you can get them all over the place, put them high, put them low, whatever. But you turn this on, just let it sit down and turn this on, blowing upwards, because heat is going to escape upwards, and the coolest air is going to be down in the bottom of this room. So you want the cool air to suck in this way, to blow up this way, and try and condense the vapors. This alone works for me about 95% of the time, and when it does not, then I combine it with the terry cloth method by putting this inside of a nice cool liquid. And oftentimes I don't even use one this complete size. God knows that depending on the size of my retort, I tear these into all sorts of different shapes and sizes. So you'll just dip whatever size that you have that you deem is appropriate inside of there, wrap it around here, then keep the fan blowing again from the bottom up towards the top. Because there's moisture inside of this, and this is just steam, what's going to happen is that you're going to allow all of that moisture and that heat that is trapped in that moisture to begin moving out much more quickly by using this method. It condenses like 100% of the time and requires very, very little maintenance on an ongoing level. Usually by the end of the distillation, the towel is still damp, and it's still cool on the underside and a little warm on the top. Up here, down here it's cool where the fan is hitting the most, and up here it's a little warm where the heat is escaping the most. So that's basically that. At any rate, those are basically the methods, no matter what you're distilling in a retort. The only other thing is that if you're making, say, diethyl ether or other things that you can distill at body temperature, literally do. Hold your flask, make sure that you use it as a meditation. I'm saying be extremely careful, utilize common sense, but if you want the full philosophical principles, utilize your body temperature, lessen your grasp, utilize fans and the outside wind and other things like that to actually control the temperature. And you'll find that you begin to gain a very, very deep connection with whatever it is that you're distilling, and the capacity for spewing out vapors is drastically reduced or altogether mitigated over time. So at any rate, hopefully that was a helpful little tutorial, and if not, thank you for bearing with me. Oh, one more thought. The other thing that you can do is I've got this little dish here underneath my receiving flask. You can place your receiving flask right there, place ice cubes around it, bingo. Now your receiving flask is going to stay cool the entire time that you're distilling. And of course, if the ice cubes melt, then your distillation temperatures are probably a little too high. Try using a fan, or replace the ice cubes in the dish and scoop out the water, or whatever else you need to do. Anyway, now I hope that this has been an informative little lesson. If not, thank you for bearing with me. Again, this is Phoenix Aurelius with Spagyric Artistry and phoenixaurelius.org. Thank you.